If you grew up in a house where report cards were framed like art, you probably can't picture my kitchen table in Dayton, Ohio. Our decor was coupons, a jar of hardware store nails, and a coffee ring that had survived 3 presidents. The morning I told my mom I wasn't going to college, she didn't argue. She laughed, like a sitcom had cued the audience, and said, "Hope you like being broke, Evan." She patted my shoulder with the same hand that had just dumped a tea bag twice, as if thrift were a personality trait. I wish I'd had a clever comeback. What I had was a knot in my throat and the familiar feeling that in this family, believing in me was an optional expense. My sister Mia already had a campus tour hoodie and a spreadsheet scholarship. My dad had the classic dad silence, arms crossed, eyes on the window. I wasn't the black sheep. I was more like the sheep they kept forgetting to bring in at night. It's not that I hated school. I loved figuring out how things worked: washing machine hoses, bike chains, the squeaky hinge on our front door. I just didn't love debt, or the idea of learning PowerPoint in 4 different buildings while trying to pretend I had a passion for macroeconomics. I'd been working 20 hours a week at Gray's Hardware, stocking shelves and cutting keys, and I noticed something strange. Saturday after Saturday, people asked about renting pressure washers. They'd stare at the price tag like it had insulted their bloodline, then ask me how hard it was to use one. So when Mom laughed, the idea that had been bumping around my head like a moth hit the light. "I'm not planning to be broke," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "I'm planning to start a business." Mom blinked, like I told her I was moving to Jupiter. Dad exhaled through his nose. Mia texted under the table, thumbs moving like hummingbird wings. That afternoon I went back to Gray's on my break and stood in front of the pressure washers. The big one, 4,200 psi, looked like a wrestler who could also recite poetry. I didn't have that kind of money, but the store sold a used unit out back, a little beat up, but it roared to life on the 3rd pull. I bought it with 2 months of savings and the kind of hope you don't say out loud in case someone laughs again. I set up a free website that night at the library, Evan's Clean Slate. I stole 3 hours of sleep between YouTube tutorials on soft washing and the 6 a.m. truck unload. I wrote a first Facebook post that sounded like a human golden retriever had typed it: friendly, enthusiastic, slightly damp. Driveway looking tired? Siding green? I can help. I stared at that publish button like it might explode. Then I pressed it. Mom saw me on the couch with my laptop. "Looking for colleges?" she asked, with the sugar-sweet tone of a baking show judge right before she eliminates you. "Looking for customers," I said. She laughed again, softer this time, as if she'd run out of volume. I swear the coffee ring on the table grew another millimeter, like it was keeping score. The first ping didn't come from a dean, it came from Mrs. Ortega 3 houses down. "Could you do our walkway before Saturday?" My heart sprinted a lap around my ribs. I typed absolutely, then deleted 5 exclamation points and settled on one. When I rolled the little machine out of our shed and the gas smell hit me, I thought, maybe broke is a season, not a destiny. Maybe broke is just the preface. Backstory isn't glamorous, but it's the map for why you turn left when everyone else turns right. I was 19, a late bloomer with calluses and a cracked phone screen. We didn't have college fund money growing up, just the alternator died. Money. The only diploma I imagined on our wall was a buy one get one lasagna receipt. At Gray's Hardware, I learned to listen. People not only rented tools, they confessed to them. "My HOA is on me about mildew. The steps are slippery. My ex is coming to get her plants, and I want the patio to look like it never loved anyone." I wrote those problems on sticky notes. Business isn't just doing a thing, it's solving the feeling underneath the thing. Most folks didn't want blasting water, they wanted to stop being embarrassed by their house. Mrs. Ortega's job was small: a walkway, a set of steps, a patch of green on the north side siding. I wore my only decent work shirt and a smile that was 70% excitement and 30% don't let me screw this up. I taped plastic over her petunias like they were VIPs and pulled the cord. The first pass cut a bright stripe through years of grime, like a time machine across concrete. Mrs. Ortega clapped. I pretended that happened all the time. I also made my first mistake that day. I got cocky with a chisel-tipped nozzle near the mailbox and etched a very artistic lightning bolt into the paint. I apologized so hard I almost pressure-washed myself. She waved it off, paid me in cash and banana bread, and said, "You care. That's going to matter." I walked home taller, carrying a loaf and a receipt that said 3 hours could be traded for something other than someone else's approval. The next 2 weeks were a blur of beginner hustle, library flyers, word of mouth, a blown hose, 2 rainouts. Every night, Mom would step over my neatly coiled hoses like they were evidence and ask if I'd reconsidered applying anywhere. Anywhere meant college. Reconsidered meant I had scared her. She was raised to believe safety comes with letters after your name. To her, my plan sounded like a bet at a loud table with all our rent money. To me, the bigger risk was wasting years and 30 grand to end up in the same kitchen, same coffee ring, just with a nicer piece of paper to set the mug on. On a Friday, I picked up a second-hand trailer that looked like it had fought in 3 small wars. I painted it white, lettered it Evans Clean Slate, and attached a number that was just my phone. When I drove past the bus stop where I used to daydream about leaving, I didn't feel like a disappointment in transit anymore. I felt like a beginning. By Sunday, 3 neighbors had booked me for just the driveway, which translated to also the steps. I took before and afters and posted them in the neighborhood group. 2 likes turned to 20. One angry comment from a guy named Ronald who types like this taught me my second lesson: not every voice deserves to drive your day. I turned off notifications and went to bed smelling like soap and victory. Pricing was another education. Undercharging felt like bribing the world to like me. I raised rates to match the time, the chemicals, the aching shoulders. Fewer maybe, more yes that meant it. It wasn't just money, it was respect, mine included. And for the first time, I slept like tomorrow had a plan. Summer crept into every crack of the neighborhood and grew moss out of thin air. Business found me through porches and porch gossip. I learned timing: start early before the heat turns your brain into oatmeal. Stop before sunset so you don't mistake a hornet nest for a decorative gourd. I swapped the superhero broom logo for a simple wordmark and a photo of a clean sidewalk so bright it looked smug. Clean Slate started to look like a company instead of a guy with a noisy machine. I also learned new math. Every dollar I made wanted to divide itself into 3: rent, gas, and reinvest. A better surface cleaner would triple my speed. An extra hose meant fewer trips to the spigot. Safety cones kept toddlers, and nosy chihuahuas, from investigating the magic water. I stopped thinking of purchases as stuff, and started seeing them as hours I could buy back from future me. Future me loved that idea. Present me ate a lot of peanut butter. At home, the vibe was weather with a chance of thunder. Mom's laugh softened into comparisons. "Your cousin Ellie is starting at Michigan State," she'd say, tidying a counter that was already tidy. "They have a study abroad program in Florence. Have you thought about anything like that?" I'd point at my calendar, 18 jobs in 11 days, and say, gently, "I have thought about Florence, the street off Kiowa. The Johnsons live there. Big driveway." Dad would clear his throat like I was a radio station with too much static. My first bad review arrived mid-July, wrapped in a paragraph of passive voice. "Not unhappy, but areas were left somewhat damp," wrote a user named PorchPirate33. Damp? As if my service was to conjure desert conditions in Ohio in July. My stomach flipped. I called, apologized for the somewhat, and drove back with towels and a fan that sounded like a helicopter with self-esteem issues. He took the review down and handed me a lemonade. Lesson 3: Show up again. Around then, Mr. Gray, the owner of the hardware store, caught me loading 10 gallons of mix into the trailer. "Your forearms say you're either getting fit or making bad choices," he said. I told him about the business, the mistakes, the damp comment colonizing my brain. He grinned. "Kid, you're building a reputation the old-fashioned way: one driveway, one apology, one handshake. Keep receipts, get insured, and wear your protection or you'll never hear your mother say I told you so." So I filed an LLC, called an agent, and ordered shirts with my name stitched small on the chest because I wanted the results to brag, not me. When the business cards arrived, I practiced saying, "We can get you scheduled," instead of, "I can maybe fit you in, sorry for existing." It felt like trying on a voice that hadn't learned to flinch. By August, the calendar was a rectangle of tiny checkmarks. I hired my friend Caleb for Saturdays and paid him more than minimum because I remembered how it felt to be treated like a replaceable thumb. We developed a rhythm. I rolled hose, he edged. I soft-washed, he chatted with curious neighbors who wanted to know if we could do something about this tragic fence. We started leaving a little card by the door. "If we missed anything, we'll fix it." Most people never called. The ones who did became lifelong customers. Fall brings a special kind of honesty to Ohio. Leaves admit they were never going to stay. The sky admits it's tired of pretending to be July. And families, they admit what they really think at dinner tables shaped like islands. At Thanksgiving, I showed up with rolls I'd actually made, a miracle that smelled like butter and apology. Mom set them down with a thanks that sounded like, "Nice hobby," then raised a toast to me as Dean's List email. Everyone clapped. Dad clapped the longest. When the room quieted, the silence looked at me like, "Well?" I took a breath and said, "Clean slate cross 50 jobs this month." Cousin Jared said, "Is that like 50 hours?" Aunt Paula asked if pressure washing was safe for boys with backs like yours. I joked, "I was born with a warranty." But it landed with a thud. Mom slid the cranberry sauce closer to me like it was a consolation prize. I ate in silence and let my brain design a better hose reel. That night I went home and did two very grown-up things. Cried in the truck for 5 minutes, then opened my laptop. If I couldn't get applause at a table, I'd try for bookings on a screen. I filmed a 30-second ad on my phone, no fancy voiceover, just before and afters flipping like satisfying pages. I wrote copy that didn't sound desperate. "We treat your home like it's ours. Except we leave on time." Caleb whistled when he saw the draft. "Dude, this slaps. I learned more acronyms in 1 week than 4 years of high school, CPM, CTR, look-alike." I targeted the zip codes where I already had word of mouth, added a little budget from the peanut butter fund, and scheduled posts for Friday evenings when people scroll and dream. I also updated the website with an online booking button because if there's one thing I understood, it's that people will do anything to avoid calling a stranger. Including me. Meanwhile, home became a museum of passive-aggressive art. Mom would accidentally leave articles open about the wage gap between college grads and everyone else, casually highlighting the salary lines with a lemon slice. Dad started reminding me about oil changes like I hadn't changed oil as a hobby in 10th grade. Mia, to her credit, asked real questions about insurance, equipment, turnaround times, and then said, "You know, entrepreneurship is a kind of major." I almost hugged her. Then she added, "Don't tell Mom I said that." A couple days later, an elderly customer, Mr. Whitaker, stood beside me while the surface cleaner spun slow bright circles on his driveway. "My wife used to chase me with a broom about this grime," he said, eyes shiny. "She'd like you." We stood there, two men listening to a machine hum, thinking about women who kept standards we didn't always meet. He paid me and said, "Charge more." I wrote that in my glovebox notebook in capital letters. Caleb and I rented a booth at the neighborhood fall fair. $20 for a folding table and the right to smile for 3 hours while kids asked if the pressure washer could blast leaves into space. We raffled a free patio cleaning and collected addresses. I didn't feel like a fraud. I felt like a local business with nerves and a dream and exactly 2 folding chairs. At night, I drafted scripts I didn't use and answers to questions nobody asked me. How do you plan to scale? Carefully. What if it fails? Then I'll still know how to work. Why not college? Because I wanted to learn by doing, all day, then try again. The ad was scheduled to go live on Thursday at 7 p.m. I set the reminder and tried to sleep. Somewhere in the house, a coffee maker gurgled like it was practicing for a spit take. Thursday arrived with the scent of wet leaves and opportunity. I worked a half day, went home to scrub the mud off my boots like I was about to take them to a job interview, and set my phone on the coffee table at 6:59 p.m. My ad budget wasn't big, just enough that, if it didn't work, I could still afford ramen and humility. Caleb texted, "Ready to be famous?" I texted back a photo of the coffee ring. "Already am, locally." At 7:01 the first booking came through, a driveway 2 blocks over. At 7:06, a deck in the next sip. At 7:19, a restaurant patio messaged about gum old enough to vote. I stared as little squares popped up on my calendar like Tetris pieces. Selling clean is simple. Show a bright stripe and people imagine theirs. By 9, I had 8 jobs scheduled and 3. "Could you also?" messages. I walked to the kitchen for a glass of water and found Mom watching a quiz show with the volume turned up loud enough to stump airplanes. She didn't look over. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm good," I said. I wanted to tell her about the bookings, about the stupid happy noise I'd made at 7:06, about how something I built had stepped into the world and not fallen over. But I'd learned not to bring fragile things into that room. The next morning, I was halfway through a siding wash when my cousin Lila sent a screenshot, Mom's Facebook timeline, with my ad right in the middle. Under it, a comment from someone from church, "That's your boy, right? Looks legit." Another comment, "My neighbor used him, fantastic work." I felt a weird twist of pride and dread. Pride, because that timeline was prime real estate. Dread, because my mom never liked being surprised by me in public. At lunch, Caleb and I ate sandwiches in the truck, windows down, playlists up. "This is happening," he said, mouth full of mustard. I nodded, feeling the kind of quiet joy that doesn't need to be announced because it finally has a seat in your own chest. We looked at the schedule. 2 weekends were already filled. "We need another machine," I said. We did the math on a napkin, the universal spreadsheet of small business owners. I bought a second washer that afternoon, and for the first time, a bank person called me. "Sir?" I left with a loan I could carry and a grin I tried to hide. On the way home, traffic crawled past the billboard on Main, the one with a real estate agent winking like she had a secret. I pictured my own ad up there someday and laughed at myself. "Slow down, Evan. Build the steps before the deck." That night, the algorithm did what algorithms do. It found my mother again. A friend texted me a blurry photo of her at Driftwood Cafe, eyes wide at her phone, coffee tilted dangerously toward its saucer. "Your mom is watching your ad," the text said, followed by 15 exclamation points. I put my phone face down and breathed. I didn't want my wins to be defined by her reactions. But I won't lie, a part of me hoped the coffee landed. When I got home, the house was quiet in that specific way that means someone has thoughts. Mom was in the kitchen rinsing a mug like it owed her money. She didn't mention Facebook. She did say, "The Johnsons from church asked if you charge extra for steps." I said I did. She nodded, the tiniest nod, like the earth had shifted half an inch. "Dinner's in the oven," she added then. "Don't eat in your room." Which, translated from Mom, meant, I don't know what to do with this new information, but I'm not rewriting the house rules either. The coffee did land, on the saucer, not the blouse. Lila confirmed it like she was reporting weather. Light drizzle at Driftwood Cafe. Chance of pride later. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Mom already at the table with the laptop open to Facebook, her reading glasses halfway down her nose. The ad autoplayed silently, a grimy walkway flipping to bright. The text, "We treat your home like it's ours. Except we leave on time." She paused it and looked up. "You made this?" she asked, as if I'd somehow borrowed a production team from Pixar overnight. "On my phone," I said. "With Caleb's hand modeling the hose." Mom nodded slowly. Dad wandered in, saw the video, and said, "Huh," which in Dad language is a standing ovation. Mom pursed her lips. "You should have told me." "I did," I said gently. "I told you I was starting a business." She exhaled through her nose, a family tradition. "I meant told me like, warned me." She gestured to the comments rolling under the video like parade floats. Neighbors were tagging neighbors. A teacher from my high school had written, "Proud of this kid." I felt a small, dangerous heat behind my eyes. Mom closed the laptop, then surprised us both. I laughed. She said, not meeting my face? When you said no to college. That wasn't right. It didn't sound like an apology you print and frame. It sounded like someone in sensible shoes trying to walk on new ground. We had plans for you. She continued. Plans we understood. I know, I said. And I had plans you didn't. We stood there with the coffee ring between us, the house quiet enough to hear last night's ad still looping in the other room. For once, nobody filled the silence with a lecture or a joke. We just stood, a small truce made of steam and pixels. By noon, the bookings had doubled. A property manager called about a row of storefronts that looked like they'd been crying soot. We need it done before the weekend, she said. Old me would have panicked. New me said. Friday 7 a.m., insurance cert by 4. Caleb fist bumped the air like we'd scored in overtime. At dinner, Mom asked if I could do the steps out front, just if you're bored. I laughed. I can schedule you, I said, not unkindly. Her eyebrows met in the middle. Schedule your mother? It wasn't the steps. It was the new boundary wrapping itself around my work like caution tape. I give everyone the same process, I said. It protects us both. Dad said. Fair is fair, while calculating whether he could sneak a second roll. That night, a friend screenshotted a comment under my ad from a woman Mom knew. Didn't your son quit school? Brave. Mom replied. He chose his path. He's doing well. No exclamation points. No backhanded compliments. Just a sentence that didn't sting. I laid back on my bed and stared at the ceiling, a $20 fan pushing new air around an old room, and let myself be proud without immediately negotiating it down. Before I slept, my phone buzzed again. Ms. Pennington, my high school guidance counselor, saw your ad. Remember when we argued about backup plans? Looks like you built a front plan. If you ever want to talk to seniors about trades, I'll bring donuts. I laughed into my pillow. Somewhere between being the kid people expected to detour and the adult writing his own maps, a door had opened. I didn't know what would walk in next. I didn't know I had a 7 a.m. with 6 storefronts and a mother who had finally spelled my path correctly. The storefront's job was a muddy symphony: detergent, rinse, repeat, with an audience of pigeons and one bakery owner who insisted on bringing us pastries before they get names. By 10 a.m., sunlight bounced off glass like it was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. The property manager walked the block with us, nodding in that slow, approving way that makes your shoulders drop an inch. She signed for quarterly service. I texted Caleb one word: steady. Steady felt new. Monday didn't own me anymore. I hired a bookkeeper named Denise who spoke fluent receipt. I set up a second crew for Saturdays and created a checklist laminated like a placemat: cones out, water mapped, plants covered, neighbor warned. We weren't winging it. We were a little system in steel-toe boots. I bought a used van that rattled and wrapped it with the clean slate logo. When I pulled up to jobs, people waved. Sometimes they asked about college. I'd say, I chose this classroom. Which is when the family group chat woke up. Aunt Paula posted the ad with a dizzy amount of emojis. Uncle Terry said he had a deck in rough shape from the 90s. Mom typed, Evan can take a look. Then, seconds later, what are your rates? I read that twice. Rates. Not favor. I told her I'd send a link like everyone else. 10 minutes later, our booking form pinged. Dawn Miller, front steps and walk. Seeing my last name with a deposit felt like a new chapter. I scheduled her for a Tuesday afternoon. I showed up in uniform, and Mom met me at the door with a look that said both welcome and what a world. Do you really need the cones? She asked. Yes, I said. They're for the neighbor who will definitely walk through and ask a question mid-rinse. She rolled her eyes, and Mr. Thompson from across the street arrived right on cue. We did the steps, the walk, and, because I am not a monster, the tiny moss line she hated by the hydrangeas. When I finished, I handed her the paid invoice and a magnet for the fridge. She stuck it up next to Mia's campus schedule. For one ridiculous second, my brain thought we got on the fridge. I packed the hoses with the calm I used to fake and now actually felt. That weekend, our company sponsored the Little League tournament. Our banner stretched along the chain link, Evan's clean slate, between a pizza place and a dentist who smiled with suspicious perfection. Mom showed up with lawn chairs and a thermos. She didn't introduce me as my son taking a gap decade. She introduced me as my son who owns the cleaning company. Dad, unprompted, asked if we'd ever considered adding gutter cleaning. I said lightly, one system at a time. Of course, not every moment was tidy. A cousin DM'd asking for a family discount on his rental property that was essentially a science experiment. I sent our standard quote with a small courtesy deduction and the same terms as everyone else. He replied, wow. I replied, professionalism is the family discount. He left me on read. I went to bed anyway. On Sunday night, Mia called from campus. Your ad keeps following me, she said. It's stalking me while I pretend to love statistics. We talked about her classes, my policies, and how we both had learned to translate Mom. She's proud, Mia said. She doesn't know how to rename the folder from college to whatever this is you're doing. I laughed. I'll write her a user manual. Make it large print, Mia said. We stayed on the line without needing to perform for each other. That felt like wealth. We signed the lease on a modest unit in a row of work bay garages out by the river, roll-up door, concrete floor, the smell of possibility and last tenant's paint. I brought in metal shelves, mounted a whiteboard, and pinned a Polaroid of our first rig on the cork wall. Caleb wrote crew rules in block letters: show up early, don't blast the gnome, we are the calm ones. Denise brought a plant I would definitely forget to water. I stood in the doorway with the keys in my palm and thought of all the doors I'd ever watched other people open. On opening day we invited our tiny circle, clients who'd become friends, Mr. Gray, Mr. Whitaker with his broom story, Mia home for the weekend, 3 kids from Little League who swore our surface cleaner had magic in it. We grilled hot dogs in the parking lot and passed around Sharpies for the first 100 jobs wall. People wrote little notes. You saved my slippery steps. My mom stopped worrying about algae. Even, you inspired my son. I pretended I had dust in my eye. It was the plant judging me. Mom came late, which used to feel like a judgment. This time it felt like her pace. She walked the perimeter like an inspector, touching the edge of the workbench, the neatly labeled bins, the clipboard hooks. You're really doing it, she said, not as surprise but as observation. We are, I said, nodding toward the crew. She looked at the whiteboard, read the job schedule, and then, this will sound silly, she straightened the magnet. People on Facebook keep telling me they've seen your ad, she added, sounding like someone reporting a weather pattern. It keeps showing up. I thought about the morning at the table, the laugh that landed like a stamp that said rejected, and the way a Facebook feed had become, somehow, a shared page. Being broke taught me how to count, I said lightly. Being doubted taught me how to keep going. She smiled, tired and real. I was scared you'd carry our worries and not our hope. I did carry them, I said, to the truck. Then I tied them down and took them for a ride. We stood there while Caleb loaded a hose and Mia attempted to befriend the plant. Mom glanced at the banner we'd hung inside, Evan's clean slate, blue on white. You know, she said, there's an opening for an admin at St. Mark's. Benefits. Steady. Old ache flared and faded. I have steady, I said. Not perfect. But ours. She nodded. Before she left, Mom asked if we could take a photo. For the timeline. She positioned us by the truck like a real estate family Christmas card. After, she squeezed my arm. When you said you'd skip college, she said, I was trying to scare you into safety. I'm still learning what safety looks like for you. Her eyes were wet. I'm sorry, I laughed. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She handed me a truth and waited. I'm building a life, I said. There's room for you if you can stop predicting its collapse. She winced, then smiled. I can try. As she turned to go, I added, Oh, and if the steps at the house ever need doing again, here's the booking link. She rolled her eyes. Hope you like boundaries, she said. Love them, I said. They pay the bills. That night, I locked the bay and stared at the quiet trucks. The algorithm was still out there flinging our little ad into feeds we would never see. Maybe some future kid would watch it while someone laughed and say, "You know what? I'm starting anyway." I set the alarm, flicked off the lights, and walked past a coffee ring of my own, a circle on the workbench where a mug had rested while I signed the lease. It looked permanent. Good. Some marks are worth keeping.